Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us at our Fleet Fuel Efficiency and Renewable Fuels webinar. My name is Pete Christensen. I am the co-director of Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition. We are a federal local partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy, and our mission is to reduce transportation-related greenhouse gases and air pollution in our 5-county territory. And we were established 32 years ago in 1994. And we are based in San Jose, California, but we cover not only Santa Clara County, but San Mateo, San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey counties. And we have been hosted locally by Breathe California, the Bay Area, Golden Gate, and Central Coast since 2008. And over the years, we've developed partnerships with numerous stakeholders. In fact, these days, Silicon Valley Clean Cities Coalition has over 500 stakeholders in our 5-county territory, and about half of them are from the private sector and half from the public sector, such as cities, counties, schools, etc. And we work with all types and sizes of fleets in our territory, and we work with product and service providers and environmental and energy agencies at all levels of government. And we also work with nonprofit and advocacy organizations. And we work to connect fleets, local fleets, with alternative fuel providers and industry partners. We provide our stakeholders with training and information, such as this webinar we're producing today. And we also provide technical assistance. And we also identify clean transportation funding, such as grants, rebates, and tax incentives. And we work to promote various clean transportation events throughout our territory. And we also collect data for the U.S. Department of Energy that helps them and us to track our progress towards clean transportation in our 5-county coalition territory. And for our agenda today, we have John Gonzalez with National Laboratory of the Rockies leading off, talking about fuel-saving tips for fleets. And then we'll have Gokul Vishwanathan with the Propane Education Research Council talking about renewable propane. And then we'll have Regan Knoll with Clean Energy Fuels talking about renewable natural gas. And then we'll have Robin Jackson we're lucky to have her available today. She was a replacement because she's one of their main spokespeople at Western States Oil for renewable diesel and does a lot of technical training in that area. So she'll especially be good in the question and answer period if you have questions about renewable diesel. This presentation will take approximately 10 minutes. And then afterwards, we'll have a 25 to 30-minute Q&A session. That will be run and moderated by my associate, Naomi Wiggins. She is our climate resilience educator with Breathe California. And then I will close out the session when the Q&A is done. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to John Gonzalez. John is the senior engineer with the Center for Integrated Mobility Sciences at the National Laboratory of the Rockies. John, take it away.
Pete, thanks. And thanks everyone for allowing me to spend a little time this morning with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my slide deck here. Once again, as Pete said, my name is John Gonzalez. I'm with the National Laboratory of the Rockies. We had a little name change about 6 months or so ago. We used to be what most folks know as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So same place, just a different name. I'm kind of, I don't know, I feel I'm a little bit of a soft start for this webinar series that we're doing today, and really the meat and potato comes after me. But I'm going to be talking about a lot of things I think folks know about, but we don't think about very often, and how we can save fuel and really kind of reduce some of our dependency. And that's what a lot of the fuels that are behind me are going to talk about, why we can use domestic fuels and domestic fuel sources. But kind of the introduction, it's going to be stuff that a lot of it you know. Hopefully some of this you will find new and can help you moving forward when you're thinking about some of these technologies. But really kind of do an introduction and the fuel saving tips, kind of driver behavior and policies. kind of this spectrum between light all the way to heavy duty vehicles and the alternative fuels data center, which, as Pete talked about, Clean Cities and Communities is part of the DOE Clean Cities program, and the alternative fuels data center is something here at the lab that we manage, but we also are in collaboration with multiple labs that put data in there. In fact, Argonne is where a lot of the idle reduction technology information comes from that I'll be speaking about today. But kind of what is the challenge, right? The challenge is most of us don't realize that there's a lot of idling going on. There's about 6 billion gallons worth of fuel that's used today in transportation that is used not to move the vehicle. It is just sitting there. And there's a lot of different reasons. But the real thing is that's a lot of fuel. So if there's an opportunity to start bringing that number down, we should really start thinking about it. Now, there are times, though, where idling is something we can't avoid. Cold weather climates. My former life, I spent time doing natural gas vehicles, but also I spent time as a fleet manager for a school district. And when it gets really cold outside, you can't really shut the school bus off because then all of a sudden that cabin heat's gone and the students can get pretty cold. But there's other technologies that I'm going to get into that help mitigate some of that. But in emergency vehicles, ambulance, police, things like that, where public safety is critical, idling does happen. Now, are there technologies? Are there battery technologies that we can put on these vehicles moving forward and as currently happening right now to where you can utilize those lights using a battery instead of running the vehicle? You bet. If you have to have somebody inside, that's a different story. But when they're sitting there at a situation, they can utilize these technologies and not have to idle the vehicle as much. We have seen many police departments starting to use these type of technologies around the country. And also electric vehicles serve a real good purpose here too, where you might not have pursuit, but the vehicle can be there to direct traffic, things like that, and you don't have to worry about an idling vehicle. Really, what are the benefits? It's saving money and we're reducing our dependency. It's a great way to not use a fuel, i.e. gasoline or diesel, when you're sitting there and reduce some of our costs for our fleets because fleet costs, fuel is one of the largest costs when you look at overall cost behind employees. It's one of the highest costs you have. And then the second thing is the reduction of wear on the engine. It just brings the maintenance cost down. This here, the whole thing folks know about diesel, and when we started using diesel particulate filters back in 2007, diesels don't like to idle as much anymore. They really don't. You start plugging up those components, your maintenance cost goes up. Also, you can get cylinder wash when you're sitting there at idle, much more so when you're driving. Those are all important things from a fleet standpoint to help reduce your cost. And we definitely saw it within the school district I was part of. And then also, believe it or not, there's a lot of noise coming from these engines when they're sitting there. For us, it was in no idle zones at the school district, which I'll show here in just a second. Noise pollution is important, right? We want to get these students, we want to have the communities having that less noise pollution is valuable for those areas. So kind of some of the big things that you look at as far as what I believe and what I saw in and how do you mitigate some of this? And really, it becomes the driver. The driver is the person. You have to get the buy-in. They have to understand the value behind it. We see these signs like idle free zones, but how do we encourage folks to do that? It really becomes a personal choice, and they need to understand that if you do shut off a vehicle after 10 seconds, you start saving a lot more money. I mean, there's really no disadvantage to leaving it running because we used to have these conditions where we say the starter, all those things. Technology's come a long way. We don't really have that much of a challenge now. We're not seeing those components fail as early and often as they did in the past. So if you're going to be sitting there for 5 minutes and the weather conditions permit it, shut the engine off, roll your windows down, and then when you need to go again, start it back up. Something also talk about here is good old drive-through lines. If you don't have to, get out, walk around. It's healthy for us. Move around, go inside that store instead of sitting there in the drive-through line for 5, 10 minutes, just idling your engine. Another thing is warming up the vehicle. I get it, warming up the vehicle, cooling the vehicle down. We love that stuff, right? That's a huge piece in society today, but it does cost us a lot of money to do so. Not only money, but a lot of fuel. One thing what you'll find is modern vehicles, I'm not just saying fire the thing up and just run it hard, but fire it up and just start driving. Just start driving and let it warm up that way. As long as conditions permit it. If you got a snow outside, not California, probably not running it that much. But if you do have snow or if you have to defrost, you're going to have to get some heat to it. But in a lot of cases, really the biggest value is go ahead and start it up and just kind of start driving it. I'm not saying drive hard, but just start driving it. They'll warm up quicker and also they'll cool quicker if you open the windows, get that air moving through there. Limit the remote start technologies. Yeah, it's great. You can just start it from your window and you can go out there in a few minutes. But believe it or not, you do have some penalties that you pay when you look at cost. Now there are some local ordinances, some idle free zones. Kind of follow that. That's the policy side of it. I always encourage the folks that we worked with was how do you want your environment to look moving forward? How can you make a difference? And that's really where they could start seeing a difference in and how did they want their environment to look forward. I know California, if you look back, you can see all the days where we had a lot more haze there than we do now. These technologies are all helping that. There's multiple technologies you can look at, light through medium, heavy duty. But once again, driver behavior becomes the first one. That really is. Automatic start technologies. I have to admit, I'm not a huge one that likes this, but it does make a difference, right? It does make a difference. A car stopping at an intersection kind of throws you off until you get used to it. But when you're sitting there for a minute, all those minutes start to add up. All those minutes add up in fuel costs and fuel use. So it definitely has a value. Auxiliary power systems, this one here, a lot of folks don't think about, but it is important in the medium heavy duty space. There are more and more companies doing this to where you can, instead of using the engine through a power takeoff, what they call a PTO, to power up a boom lift or things like that, you can use battery type systems to do that. Air heaters are really a good option as well for vehicles that are medium heavy duty space where you can utilize that to heat the cabin. We did that with our school buses, air heaters that would utilize coolant. They were using auxiliary heaters that would utilize a small amount of diesel fuel, didn't have to run the engine, and then could heat the bus that way. It was very effective. Just different ways that you can look at using technologies that are out there that can help you save some fuel and save money. Save money. And then finally, I want to make sure that we talk about the alternative fuels data center. All this information I just presented and much more can be found there. This is not, I'll be the first one to say, not a sexy subject. I work with fleets all the time, and it's like this is a hard one to implement. And I'm not going to say it's not, but there are some great values. There are great values on the maintenance side. You keep the hours down on the vehicles. You don't worry about that DPF that you have to do the regen near as often. As we know, California has idle reduction policies on diesels. Don't let them idle for more than 15 minutes, things like that. Those not only help us reduce fuel, save money, but it also keeps the engines lasting longer. So there's a lot of good things out there for folks to look at. And Pete, I'm happy to turn it over. This is the last slide of my presentation. And thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you taking time out of your day and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you will be available during the Q&A if people have questions.
Sure
Uh,
will.
so
You
thank
bet.
you for hanging with us. And now I'd like to introduce Gokul Vishwanathan. He is the Director of Research, Development, and Innovation with the Propane Education and Research Council, otherwise known as PERC. Go ahead, Gokul. Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I am Gokul Vishwanathan. I have a few slides here, but I will try to breeze through them to keep in time within 10 minutes. Who are we? Propane Education and Research Council. We are the industry investment arm for the US propane and LPG industry. What we do is we are a nonprofit organization, but we collect assessment on propane that is sold in the US, half a cent for every gallon. So the US propane industry is about 9 billion gallons retail. So half a cent, it's about 45 to $50 million. And we reinvested back that money for the benefit of the industry for research and development, safety training, and communications, including consumer communications. We are one of the probably 50-ish 501(c)s in the country with a dedicated revenue stream. And we work across several markets: on-road transportation, off-road, agriculture, residential, commercial, and power generation. The topic today of interest is on-road transportation. I'll talk about four themes here. I know this is specifically about renewable propane, but I would also want to introduce to the crowd about propane: availability, affordability, reliability, and sustainability. And let's hit the first point on available. There is a poll here. If you are able to use your cell phone and scan the QR code, I would appreciate that. There is a poll which asks essentially which country is the largest producer and exporter of propane or LPG or liquefied petroleum gas. And the options that I've given are Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United States, United Arab Emirates, China, and Canada. Okay. I think we can pause there. We don't want to spend the entire 10 minutes looking at the poll here, but the majority is not wrong here. Actually, United States of America. I'm surprised by this answer. Maybe I should do a better job of putting a poll to add a trick question in there. But uh, you are right. United States is the biggest producer and the exporter of propane. We produce about 40 billion with a B gallons of propane. And every molecule of propane that is not used in the US is exported out predominantly to Asia. 27 billion gallons exported out of the US right now. So it's a domestic fuel. I would argue that it's not only available, but it's abundant in the US right now. There's quite a bit of LPG going out of the US with the Strait of Hormuz closing through Africa to the Asian markets right now. So we are the biggest exporter, we are the biggest producer of propane. So there is no shortage of fuel, at least in the country. Let's talk about affordability. Again, I mentioned about the Strait of Hormuz. Here I am showing diesel gallon equivalent prices at the right-hand side, if you're able to see my pointer. Here, right now, regular gasoline, this is as of July 20th, is trading at $4 a gallon, which is about $4.6 per diesel gallon equivalent. Diesel is about $5 a diesel gallon equivalent. E85 or E100 ethanol is a locally grown fuel that's around $5 diesel gallon equivalent. Propane, on the other hand, for fleets, is available at $1.9 to about $2 right now per gallon of propane, which is about $2.9 per diesel gallon equivalent. So it's one of the cheapest fuels that is available in the US right now. It is about 37% below gasoline prices right now and 44% below diesel prices because it's abundant, it's available. There is tremendous amount of inventory in the country right now for propane, and it's readily available for usage in fleets. In terms of fueling infrastructure, a small private fleet with 25 vehicles, the fueling infrastructure, propane is easily liquefied at about 100 psi to 125 psi or 150 psi-ish. And you could get for about 25 vehicles, you could put the infrastructure for about $50,000. If you have a large fleet of about 100 vehicles, it would just scale up appropriately to about $175,000. Typically, the propane retailer will own, install, and maintain the fueling infrastructure. So the fleet as such does not have to worry about the fueling infrastructure. They take care of it, they install it, they own it, they operate it, and they fill the tank as and when needed. And everything is built into a pricing contract for about 3 years to 5 years. So very cheap fuel, very cheap infrastructure that's available. In terms of maintenance cost, it's a lower oil consumption. Since propane is a spark ignited fuel, there is no DPF, diesel particulate filter. There is no diesel exhaust fluid. There are no fuel additives, and fairly cleaner combustion because propane is C3, and it's a very clean fuel. In terms of the emissions architecture complexity, on the left, you see the typical diesel architecture with the diesel oxidation catalyst, with the diesel particulate filter, with a copper zeolite SER or selective catalytic reducer, and an ammonia oxidation catalyst, which is not shown here. And a def tank and controls associated with it for a typical diesel engine. For propane engines, it's very similar to gasoline and very similar to natural gas. If natural gas is stoichiometrically combusted, you typically have a three-way catalyst, a catalytic converter that is used for reducing your hydrocarbon, carbon monoxide, and NOx emissions. In terms of total cost of ownership, this is using the DOE's or Argonne National Labs A-Fleet tool. We compared gasoline, diesel, electric vehicle B20, biodiesel 20, LPG, and CNG. From a TCO standpoint, we see that LPG offers one of a very promising, and if not the most savings in terms of the total cost of ownership, predominantly driven by the low fuel pricing and the low infrastructure that is needed for putting in. And you don't have to take my word. Actually, you can take it the word of a fleet. This is from ACT Expo, the recent ACT Expo that was held in Las Vegas. This slide is courtesy of Paul Strobis, who is the manager of Broward County Transit. In about 10 years, with the alternative fuel tax credit, Paul has been able to save Broward County $17.4 million relative to gasoline. And even if you take the alternative fuel tax credit, he's able to save about $13 million over a period of 10 years from 2015 to 2025. So these are savings before the Strait of Hormuz closing and the Iran war. After the war, actually, these savings even look even more aggressive and higher than what we had seen before the war, essentially. So fleets that want to convert to propane are enjoying a lot of savings in terms of pricing. Reliability, it is independent of the electric grid. Like I said, nationwide there is abundant supply of it, and cold weather performance is demonstrated by propane. Increased uptime, there is no range limitations for propane. You could go easily up to 400 miles using a propane vehicle, and OEM and training and support are available for propane. And in terms of sustainability, renewable propane is available. It is a byproduct of renewable diesel production. So any biorefinery that is using fats, oils, and grease in the country right now producing or biomass-based feedstocks, producing renewable diesel will also produce renewable propane as a byproduct. It is available today. Predominantly, all the renewable propane goes into California because of the low carbon fuel standards. But there are other credit-driven markets where we are seeing some attention for renewable propane. Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico, and as of last week, Hawaii as well. So that because there are credits available for renewable propane for the transportation sector, which includes on-road transportation as well as for off-road transportation, including forklifts. This is basically chemistry 101. Basically, what this slide is saying is any process or biorefinery that is producing renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel in the country produces naphtha as a byproduct and also renewable propane as a byproduct. Given the feedstock is a triglyceride feedstock or a fats, oils, and grease-based feedstock, as an input to this hydrotreating process. In terms of carbon intensity, renewable propane's carbon intensity is the same as renewable diesel's carbon intensity today because it is produced from the same process. It's a byproduct. Traditional propane's carbon intensity is about 78, while renewable propane's carbon intensity can vary depending on 20 to 20, 30, or even 40, depending on the feedstock that is predominantly used for producing the renewable propane. And this is from the California Air Resources Board approved pathways. You see diesel or gasoline is about 100.8. Diesel is about 100.4 in carbon intensity. On the y-axis, we show the carbon intensity. Propane by itself, regular propane without renewable propane by itself is 83.19. So propane by itself is about 17% lower in carbon intensity compared to diesel and gasoline. And then you go to renewable propane, you see substantial reduction of that. And like I said, depending on the feedstock, you could go as low as 26 if you use used cooking oil, to as high as maybe 68 if you use soybean oil as the feedstock for producing renewable propane. Several biorefineries in the country are currently producing renewable propane, and we are in discussions with them to increase the gallons of renewable propane. Right now, we are producing somewhere around 3 to 4 million gallons of renewable propane. But we are expecting it to increase to 20 million gallons because one of the refineries is going a significant upgrade and a second refinery is coming online right now. So we see this jump from 3 million by 10x to about 20 million gallons by next year. But mind you that the propane industry, odorized propane market, including residential, commercial, on-road, off-road transportation, is about 9 billion gallons. So it's still a drop in the bucket. But we are trying to increase the usage as well as the sales of renewable propane in the country. In terms of credits tracking, I'll just quickly go over this. We have the EPA RINs credits available for renewable propane, the most recent 45Z IRS tax credit available for renewable propane. And depending on your state, in this case, I show an example of California low carbon fuel standards, but renewable propane also qualifies for Oregon clean fuel standards, Washington clean fuel standards, New Mexico clean fuel standards, and Hawaii clean fuel standards as well. Right now, if producers who are producing renewable propane can enjoy these credits, and they could easily, kind of get to break even or even make a profit on producing renewable propane and selling it into the retail market. And finally, path to this is just to show that renewable propane and propane offer a path to near zero emissions. Currently, engines are being certified at zero point 0.0 gram NOx. Already, exceeding the EPA 27 threshold of 0.035 gram NOx. No changes are needed to meet the EPA 2027 regs. There is virtually no PM, there is no DPF in these. And like I said, renewable propane propane by itself offers CO2 reduction. Renewable propane increases the advantage of CO2 reductions. Like I said, there are no after treatment complexities for achieving EPA 27 emissions targets. And more recently, as you can see, non-conformance penalties have been implemented for diesel engines that cannot meet the 27 regs emissions targets. With propane, you don't have to deal with non-conformance penalties for 2027 because all these engines already meet the NOx and PM standards. And that is my last slide. Happy to take any questions as this evolves. Thank you.
Thank you, Gokul. Great presentation. We appreciate it. And again, Gokul will be available, and John and our other presenters at our Q&A session at the end. And again, we'll enable a chat at that time and get the Q&A going afterwards. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce Regan Knoll, who is the Director of Renewable Natural Gas Development and Supply with Clean Energy Fuels, and he's going to be talking about renewable natural gas. Take it away, Regan.
Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Regan Knoll. I'm the Director of National Accounts for the U.S. for Clean Energy. And what we're going to be talking about today is renewable natural gas for heavy-duty trucking and why we do that and what our business model is. So what is clean energy? Well, clean energy is a few things. So number one, we're a renewable natural gas company, a renewable natural gas supply. We do our own production of renewable natural gas, third-party renewable natural gas contracts, and partnerships. But our main business is really renewable natural gas for transportation. So we are in the business of building renewable natural gas fueling stations. We were founded by T. Boone Pickens back in the early 90s as using natural gas as a transportation fuel, and we have moved over to renewable natural gas as our source in our company. So we build natural gas fueling stations, provide maintenance and support related to those fueling stations. We retail natural gas, renewable natural gas at stations that we own. And we have some liquefied natural gas options as well that we do for the company. So vertically integrated company that we are involved in. As I said before, we own some RNG supply. We do construction of maintenance and natural gas fueling stations, provide grants and financing as it relates to moving to a renewable natural gas powered fleet, because as you can possibly imagine, it is capital intensive, not only on the fueling station side, building a whole new station for yourself and your fleet, but also on the truck side, moving over to a newly powered vehicle that's heavily powered by renewable natural gas. So two types of stations, what we're talking about your typical fast fill station that you would go fill up your gasoline vehicle at, where the natural gas is dispensed on a per gasoline gallon equivalent or diesel gallon equivalent minute, or a time fill station where our technology really fits in is on the heavier duty side, fleets that are return to base operation. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about buses that go out, come back, also talking about garbage trucks that go out, come back, and delivery trucks, Amazon trucks, and the sort. So time fill station, fill up over time, fast fill station on a per gallon charge. And just to get your head around, when you go to a CNG station or a renewable natural gas station, you'll see these boxes, they're called compressors. And you would think of those, each one of those compressors can do so many gallons of natural gas per hour or per minute. And that's what really dictates how fast the flow of natural gas will be coming out of the station. Just to give you some an idea. Just some very beautiful pictures here. Some of the stations that we've built. They're in San Bernardino, California, Fort Worth, Texas, and Kearney Point. A lot of the stations that we built for Amazon And you can see there their beautiful trucks and our beautiful canopy. So what is renewable natural gas? So it's many different sources. It comes from landfills, wastewater treatment plants, and livestock manure. Really, really exciting and well-smelling things, but it's really important. And we really enjoy it because we are capturing methane that is an even greater greenhouse gas emitter, and cleaning that methane up and injecting it into the pipeline with all the other natural gas. And we feel proud that we'll be able to use that and using it as a transportation fuel. So how is RNG made? You got the manure collection right here. It goes into a digester where all the methane is captured. That dirty methane is cleaned up to a high BTU content, and that will be match the standards of all the other natural gas. It's injected into the pipeline and then nominated at a clean energy station. We'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. Same thing as a landfill. Waste is collected. The landfill gas is collected here at the landfill. The gas is cleaned up. The methane is cleaned up, injected into the pipeline with all the other natural gas produced in the country, and then it's siphoned off into the natural gas fueling station, nominated at a site. And what that means, I guess I'll go into it here a little bit. When the gas is nominated, let's say you've got a dairy farmer, let's say this dairy farmer is in Iowa, and you've got a fleet of natural gas garbage trucks that are in San Jose, California, and they need 200,000 diesel gallon equivalents of natural gas or renewable natural gas. And let's say this manure, this dairy produces 500,000 gallons of renewable natural gas in 1 year. What happens is it's nominated. A lot of paperwork. I'm not going to get into the details of it, making sure the EPA stipulations are correct, but saying, hey, our San Jose fleet needs 200,000 gallons of this dairy, and we're going to nominate that gas. And the federal government gives money associated with using that fuel because it's a good thing, capturing methane, cleaning it up, and using it as a transportation fuel. So there's incentives for that. It's called a RIN. Get a portion of the RIN and the RIN share. Also, state of California and other states offer what's called LCFS credits. So it's just double dipping in helping the economics with deploying natural gas. Just a chart showing the RNG market volume. We're starting to see a significant amount of sources of RNG coming online. How it reduces Scope 1 and Scope 3 emissions. I'm not going to go into full detail here, but I'll definitely provide this as an example. But tailpipe emissions do occur with RNG, but because of the CO2 emissions, they're biogenic and they're reported outside some of the scope emissions. So we'll kind of go through that. Why would you do RNG? Well, it just feels good, right? So you're using a renewable natural gas source, a renewable fuel to power your vehicles, and it's sustainable, right? So it might not be the actual physical clean molecule that's coming from that Iowa example I gave you, but knowing that you are running renewable natural gas vehicles means you are driving initiatives and economics for those programs to capture even more RNG supply around the country. So affordable, walk through that a little bit. If you have high fuel consuming fleet to justify your own station or to fill up at a public access station you might have down the street. And it's been proven. Just look around at the waste managements in the republics. I think Waste Management is at 80% of their garbage fleet is powered by natural gas. As much as we would like to say they do it for environmental purposes, they're in it to make money. And it's obviously making money if 80+% of their fleet is powered by natural gas. So just an example of something like that. And that the engines, at the end of the day, you want your trash picked up, you want your 3-hour toothbrush to show up at your door. It's proven technology. Just life cycle emission comparisons when you're comparing RNG from manure or dairy, food waste, and just the comparisons as you can see on the carbon intensity level. Your availability. We only have one OEM engine that is available that when you go to buy a truck, you can select an engine. Some of you might not know that when you go, typically go to buy a truck, a heavy duty truck, you can select the engine. This is a spark ignited engine, natural gas engine from Cummins. These are the truck manufacturers that will put that engine into your truck, and then the fuel providers for that. Beautiful picture of what the truck what the engine looks like and its capabilities of moving some heavy stuff. And just a brief overview of the truck incentives and grants. As I said before, natural gas on a diesel gallon equivalent is extremely cheap when you look at an MMBTU basis. And the taxes and electricity, but where it starts to get expensive is the cost of the station. The cost of a station can run between 1.5 million all the way up to $3 million. And so if you don't have enough volume coming out of that station, it's not going to make economic sense for you to do it. So there's the cost associated with that. And then the truck runs about, a heavier duty truck runs about $60,000 to $70,000 more than your typical diesel truck. So a diesel truck is $200,000. You could look to pay a premium of $60,000 to $70,000. So not only are you dealing with the station infrastructure cost, you're dealing with the truck infrastructure cost, or the truck cost premium, but it does make sense if you have the high fuel consuming fleet for your truck and your station. It makes economic sense, but it's that capital investment that's important. So grants available for that to be issued. Just a quick overview of some renewable natural gas stations that we own and tractor trailer friendly here in the Southern California area and Northern California part, and our massive amounts of station infrastructure all over the country. Now, this includes public fueling stations and private fueling stations. As I mentioned before, a lot of our fleets are return to base operations that are just private fueling for themselves operation. So we do have a demo program where you can try one of the trucks that we have to see if it works for you before you bite off on that huge financial donut for a renewable natural gas station. And just kind of the breakdown of what you look at on a diesel gallon equivalent for a natural gas gallon. So you've got the commodity cost, you've got the electricity cost. When I say compression fee, that's the operation and maintenance of the station, plus maybe the capital investment of the station. So this is with capital, and this is, let's say you already paid for the station. And you can see how pretty significant it is in terms of price per diesel gallon equivalent, and then additional carbon credits that you might have on average. Now, obviously, this is a very broad example, and it's going to be based on your fleet, but running through those economics are important to see if it might work for you. But I typically like to recommend to fleets that haven't jumped into renewable natural gas powered vehicles or CNG, find a station that might be nearby to maybe try the technology out with a truck. Might not be the most efficient operationally, but you'll get an idea that it actually does the job before you kind of move on from there. Just some of our national customers that we work with. And if you have any questions, happy to field them at the end.
Thank you very much, Reagan. I appreciate it. And now for a final presenter, I'd like to introduce Robin Jackson. She is the Senior Director of Fuel and Lubricant Sales and Director of Marketing with Western States Oil. Robin, go ahead.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you for attending. Let me go on and share my screen. So as Pete mentioned, I am a Senior Director of Fuel Sales and also a technical trainer for renewable diesel. This information could go well over an hour, so much like Gokul, I'm going to speak very quick and try to cram it in. I'm happy to extend a full class to anybody who would like it. All right, so what is renewable diesel? First of all, there's a huge misconception that renewable is bio. They're totally different products. They do start with the same raw organic feedstock, but how you create one from the other is drastically different. So renewable diesel is a hydrocarbon fuel, just like fossil fuel, only you don't have to dig into the ground to bring, old rotting, decaying organisms from millions of years ago to the surface to create it. Bio is actually a fatty acid methyl ester, so it has its own spec. So two totally different products. Okay, so like I said, it's not a biodiesel. It is a ULSD drop-in replacement. It is produced from 100% renewable and sustainable raw materials. It's a very premium product. Fossil fuel, the D975 spec is very broad. It doesn't take much to meet spec, but with renewable diesel, should be odorless and clear every time. Very high cetane, cleaner burning, excuse me, and very stable. So where some fuels may only last for 6 months to a year, renewable diesel, so far we've had some of our original batch sitting at a research and development lab in Finland for over 25 years, and it has not broke down, acidized, changed forms, needs no additives to keep it sustainable. Basically made out of stuff that ordinarily is going to go into your landfills, such as animal fats, used cooking oil, plant bases, things like that. So this is a little bit about what it is. And so if you were to think about the atmosphere being a giant sponge, so with regular fossil fuel, basically, like I mentioned before, you're going to be digging into the ground and introducing new carbon onto the surface, which historically is what you would see in the sky, becoming the smog and all the gunk. But with renewable diesel, you're basically taking what's already on the surface and just recycling it over and over. So that sponge isn't going to soak up and spill out. It's just going to keep recycling through. Um, so, it's a really great way to meet sustainability objectives and any green mandates. You're basically recycling carbon that already exists. We are endorsed by most major OEMs. My team worked with Cummins, MTU, and Detroit Diesel on the original, endorsements from the OEMs, went through years of studies. So, they do accept it as an approved equivalent to regular diesel. You're not having to change your infrastructure. You're not adding any charging stations. You're not having to produce, canisters onto your equipment, which reduces your runs, and also adds weight to where you're not hauling as much to make weight on the scales if you have batteries and canisters for natural gas and things like that. So you're not doing anything to how you're currently receiving the fuel other than changing the type of product that you're buying. This particular screen is actually about 8 slides. I chopped it down for the sake of time, but the original diesel engines were actually designed to run on peanut oil and coal dust. So anything that would fit in this gray square would be something that would power your engine. So they don't just run on diesel. But as time went on and engines got a little more intricate, OEMs pulled together and realized they needed to get some controls. So they came up with the ASTM D975 spec for diesel. And then as time went on, the parts per million on sulfur was reduced in the US to 15 parts per million. It used to be like 500. Sulfur is really nasty. It's carcinogenic. It's not good for us to breathe. So it was good that they did that. You're going to have the high sulfur content still in your Jet A for preventing freezing and whatnot in the skies. But then California, because we always do everything a little bit different, around 2008, give or take, California Air Resource Board restricted the amounts of aromatics to less than 10%. And so California spec on D975 is much smaller than the other countries. And then you have the paraffinic fuels, which are still a hydrocarbon fuel, but they're synthetic. And those all allow for a bio blend. So right now, regular diesel sold in the United States and several renewable diesels do allow up to a 5% bio blend. And so think of every 5% of bio that goes into your fuel. Now, bio does have an oxygen molecule, and wherever oxygen and water air mixes becomes a breeding ground for microbial growth. So you really want to avoid bio touching your tanks, your filters, and other things like that. And then there are some renewable diesels out there that restrict the blending, which is going to heavily be the Neste My brand, which is why I stand them aside on our presentations here. And then this is on a per megajoule basis. Now I do touch on the red line here being the baseline for carbon intensities on regular fossil fuel. You can switch to a CNG or an RNG, but because many of those now the higher quality products that were recently talked about that are capturing methane from farms is a little bit different and a lot lower on the carbon intensity than this slide, which I will be honest is a little outdated because historically you still had to dig into the ground to pull those gases out, which is not necessarily true anymore today. But with electricity, it's heavily produced still by nuclear power and coal mining. So renewable diesel, being that it's produced from trash, and we also take this as will to well. So this is going to be how you not only capture the feedstock, but what fuels are operating those pieces of equipment to get it into production in the first place. And then, like I said, with electricity, it's very dirty to produce. So even though an electric vehicle may have a zero emission from the tailpipe, the pollution to create electricity in the first place is really nasty. So renewable diesel is going to drop you from that 102 mark down to about 34, where we are absolutely cleaner than any electric vehicle in the country. And think of everything that uses energy does have a carbon intensity. So this is including like the shirt you're wearing. I'm going to go really fast through this. This is basically a fat molecule. It's triglyceride. It's literally what your doctor doesn't want to see, on your labs. So it's kind of important to know that this is what you're going to start with on a feedstock. So you've got that little bend on the side, and then you've got some missing pieces there. You've got the black is going to be your carbon, and then you're going to have the little red dots that are the oxygen. And you put this all together, and so basically to make a biofuel or a renewable diesel, you're going to start with the same basic uh, feedstock. So with bio, basically, like I mentioned, it's a fatty acid methyl ester or a FAME. So you are whatever goes into it is going to come out. You're going to keep the oxygen molecules, and that's going to affect everything, including cold properties downstream. But whatever goes in goes out. So whether you're using soy, use cooking oil, or whatever, that's going to absolutely impact your final property. But with renewable diesel, you're basically going to use a really it's an isomerization process, which is kind of a tongue twister of a word, but basically they're going to use really high temperature, high pressure hydrogen, and it's going to perfect the molecule. So um, whatever goes in does not impact what comes out. And so you're going to perfect all the missing chains. It's going to get straightened out. And I can get into this a little deeper, but I'm going to try to stick to time, stick to the time on that. So a couple more nerdy slides here. This is going to be basically a picture of what fossil fuel would look like. And there's short chains and long chains because wherever the world it's produced is going to be a little bit different. And then you've got those little ringworm looking things at the bottom, and that's going to be your aromatics. That's going to be what causes allergies, irritants, carcinogenics, and all of that. And then this is going to be basically what renewable diesel looks like. It's the sweet spot of the carbon chain. It's basically a perfect molecule. You couldn't get it any better than this. And notice you also lose the aromatics. We converted a national, actually on the California level, but a huge ready mix plant. And they didn't tell their drivers that they had switched to renewable diesel. They just did it. And very rapidly within the first week, we had drivers coming forward to say for the first time ever, they felt clear-headed. They didn't feel sick. They weren't breathing in all that exhaust and gunk coming out of the tailpipe all day. So this is really great for idling workers such as the ready mix, firefighters, ambulance operators, things like that. Also, a lot of refuse companies, where they're stop and go all day. It's a really great product. And then, like I mentioned, the D975 spec. We did this back in 2018. We drove around California and we pulled diesel samples from random gas and truck stops throughout the state. And each one of those pictures met D975 spec. So you've got some vinegar, you've got some lemonade, you've got some molasses. Each one of those met spec. But then you've got renewable diesel, clear like water and odorless every time. So definitely an excellent option on quality. So why renewable diesel, right? So you're going to have, like I said, aromatic free, super high flash point, which is going to meet the safety of life at sea standard for the Coast Guards. Also, firefighters prefer this. High flash point is going to be the temperature to which it has to reach to ignite. So in California, this is required for every vessel operating in the bays, and also for on-road. They are switching over to this. Um, so now it's in the tank. They have to store it. I did mention that it is very stable. On a few slides back where I mentioned the red dots were oxygen, and then that actually goes away. The three chains of binding the oxygen, the carbons that bind the oxygen to the molecule, those come off and actually make renewable propane, which is captured and sold to market as a renewable propane. So our wastewater is it either goes to a water treatment plant or it goes to propane producers as part of our offstream for that. And it's basically it's nonpolar, which means it's going to reject oxygen, it's going to reject water. So if any water gets into renewable diesel, it's going to separate very quickly. It's like the oil and vinegar thing where they just don't mix. It's going to go straight to the bottom. And so like I mentioned before with bio is going to grab onto it's got water and oxygen in it. So it's going to grab and bind. So you're going to have the microbial growth. So with renewable diesel, there is a near zero risk of getting that gunk and buildup in your tanks because the oxygen molecule, it doesn't exist there. This was a maintenance interval that was sent to us from Vista Unified School District down in Southern California. They did a 4,000-mile interval on a school bus, and then they repeated it once they converted over to our renewable diesel, and they were so blown away. They took pictures. You could see the filter still brand new, as opposed to the carbon clouded gunk that was on it from the last one. So you're going to have premium performance. Biggest part now, like I said, it's through your filters down to the high pressure pumps, the injectors, the in-cylinder work, and other stuff. So one of the first things, a little lower on the slide here, but the high pressure and the injection and pumps and all of those are really tight tolerance, very critical parts. They're basically relying on fuel as a lubricant, just like your bearings are going to need your lubricating oils to stay alive. Your injectors and pumps need fuel to stay alive, right? So you can't really have the metal on metal wear. So within the D975 spec, there's also a spec for lubricity. And so what you do on that, the lower the test, the lower the numbers, the better protection it got. So what they do is they're going to take those two pieces of metal, they're going to submerge them down into the fuel, and they're going to run a test on that. And then they count the wear scars. So the lower the scars, the better protection it got. Now, a lot of people are concerned that with the lower sulfur content in renewable diesel, they're afraid that it actually strips the lubricity. But we start with no sulfur in the first place with renewable diesel, even though diesel fuel calls for less than the 15 parts per million. Renewable diesel doesn't really have any sulfur in the first place. So sulfur does not actually provide lubricity. The misconception is that when you reduce sulfur, or actually the reality is when you reduce sulfur, you're actually also stripping lubricity. But we are not reducing sulfur because there's none to begin with. And then with that, we actually use more lubricity additives and better lubricity additives. So I'll show you at the end the spec on that. We're currently delivering a high 300, low 400s on wear scars, where I believe 560 is the spec in Europe, and then it's somewhere around that range in the US. And then this is really exciting. This actually came from us from Detroit Diesel. What you're looking at there is called an armature. It's a piece that slides up and down in the injector to let the fuel slide to the end cylinder. It's a very high tolerance, critical part. So this needs to be free flowing. So Detroit Diesel did a simulation where they wanted to see what would happen first. Was the injector going to fail? Was the fuel going to go off spec? So they wanted to see what was going to happen if the fuel broke down over time. So that, like I said, will it physically fail? So with the B5 there, which I talked about earlier on the the spec with the blue circle, nearly every gallon of fuel in the US is a B5 blend. And so the B5, which is basically diesel that you would get from any site that's still selling fossil fuel with the 5% bio blend, it failed after 13 test cycles and it was like stuck. They had to get a mallet and like force it out. It was really stuck. And then you've got the ULSD one in the middle, which basically was the fossil fuel before the bio was added. And this ran for 49 test cycles. And you've got a ton of carboxylate buildup in the middle there. And this one did require a significant amount of force to remove it. And then they switched to renewable diesel, did get a little discolored from the organic nature of the feedstock, but the cycles just ran and ran and ran and ran, never acidized, because literally fuel, as it breaks down, it can acidize. So it could be stable one moment and then literally the acid levels could just shoot up like a hockey stick and punch you in the eye. So with renewable diesel, it just ran and ran and ran until their technicians gave up and it just slid out into the technician's hand as though it was brand new and fully, just installed like the next day. So with renewable diesel, you're going to get a significant amount of, improvements on your maintenance with the filters, your injectors, and also with your DPFs, which is what takes me here. So, um, I'm going to get to that. So it's gone through the pump, through the filters, through the cylinder, out the tailpipe. So DPFs are a huge pain for fleet operators. We know that. So with renewable diesel, you're going to get about 33% less soot in the cylinder, which is going to mean 33% less soot in their EGR coolers and the EGR valves and other stuff, but also the DPFs. You may or may not know what it feels like to have a driver ignore their region lamps and then they end up broke down on the side of the road because they're so plugged up with soot. So we're not going to plug up all those microchannels in the DPF quite as fast. And outside of soot, combustion also creates ash, and ash is actually unburnable. Correct that, excuse me, with the region. So ash is going to come from impurities in your fuel and from combustion on lubricating oils and it's going to build up over time. It cannot be taken care of in a region. So you want to use a cleaner fuel along with cleaner oils to reduce that. We have switched to, we've been doing this now since about 2017 with the pure renewable diesel after we converted away from the bio. And we had fleets that used to have to regen or bake their DPFs quarterly or at least twice a year. Now, a DPF could be as cheap, and I say cheap, but it's still a huge expense. You're talking about $3,500 to over $5,000 or $6,000 per filter. And we've got some people that haven't had to touch them in over 2 years now. So it's a huge savings. Kind of hard to pinpoint these because you've got different driving habits, you've got different temperatures and climates and steepness of road and route. But we do know that there's a significant savings by switching to renewable diesel, if nothing else, for the sake of your DPFs and injectors. And then when I say cleaner burning, this is what it would look like. Renewable diesel on the left, the exhaust of a regular fossil fuel on the right. And I believe for the sake of time, I could stop here. If anybody's interested in more information, we could schedule a class. I would slow down and get into the chemistry and everything a little more thoroughly on how it's made and why it's different. But just basically no infrastructure changes, and basically to drop in replacement to fossil fuel and offers a drastic cleaner CI score. So
Okay, thank you,
with that,
Robin.
yes, sir.
And we'll be sending out the the recording of as I mentioned earlier, the recording of this webinar. And I believe you have your contact info on your slide. So thank you, Robin. Thank you, Go Cool. Thank you, John. Thank you, Reagan. Great presentations, very educational. And we're going to open up the Q&A, and Naomi will be running this part of the session. And again, thank you for everybody for coming. And does anybody have any questions for our presenters? We've still have some time left for Q&A.
Yes, I'll be looking at the chat as well. So if you don't necessarily want to speak, you can go ahead and put it there and I can ask the question on your behalf.
Don't be shy if you have anything, about idle reduction, fuel savings questions. Actually, I wanted to ask a question about to John personally about many years ago. I was in the tire business, automotive shop business. We sold a lot of tires, and tire manufacturers had said, but if you use certain types of tires, you can save gas mileage. Not only that, but they also emphasized air pressure in your tires. If your tires are low in air pressure and you don't check that, you can lose, I don't know, I think it was 15-20% in your gas mileage, if your tire pressure is underinflated. So that's something very important to check. And John, if you could, do you have any knowledge in that area or any thoughts?
I wouldn't be able to give you any specifications on that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we want to follow the label the manufacturer recommended for that tire pressure that will maximize that. Yes, there are different tire compounds that have better rolling resistance than others and can definitely affect fuel economy. So those are considerations to look at. You bet.
Excellent. Thank you.
You bet.
And Robin, just quickly, from my understanding, renewable diesel, anybody currently using a diesel, whether it's a light or medium heavy duty vehicle, can just drop renewable diesel right in. They don't need any engine modifications. They can go ahead and use it. What is the renewable diesel price these days in comparison to regular diesel?
Very much in line with regular diesel. In fact, in California, it's even more affordable some days because all of our refineries have converted to renewable production. And so a lot of fossil fuels being railed in now. So you'll find that it's priced very comparably. We are still using the distillate Opus index for pricing, although renewable does now have its own index. It's not very reliable just yet. So it's pretty comparable to fossil fuel. And
And
yes,
that's
it is a drop-in replacement. You can go back and forth between the two. If you go out of state and you need to get dirty diesel from some random site and wherever,
heaven forbid.
it's not going to hurt anything. It's just going to reduce the maintenance benefits that you get from sticking with renewable.
Yeah, well, with renewable, it's not only price competitive, but from my understanding, you're right there, you're reducing 65% of your emissions,
Correct.
whether air pollution, and greenhouse gases. So and if you have a school bus, you're really helping the students out and yourself out. You're not breathing all those noxious emissions. And so you're really protecting the environment and doesn't cost you anymore. So
Right.
to me,
Yeah.
it
If you're a
seems like a
trucker
great
driving down
idea.
the highway, your smokestack's blowing behind you, you probably don't care so much. But like you said, school bus, paramedics, ready mix plant drivers, it makes a huge difference on their health.
Yeah, and how does it, there's any application to carbon credits, the clean fuel credits in California here?
We typically buy the fuel stripped from LCFS, so there's not really any
Wow.
credits to apply for. It's already built into your
Okay.
price. If we were
Okay.
to ship it out of California, we then have to bill those credits back because they're California specific.
Sure.
But the refiners keep the LCFS and the RINs. So we
Okay.
already buy and sell it stripped of that.
Okay. Excellent. But you pass along the savings to the consumer, so that's great.
Right.
Yeah, but to me, if I had a diesel truck or Mercedes or whatever, that seems like a great. There's plenty of renewable diesel stations here in California, all over the place.
Yep.
And you can just try and start using it right now, and really protect the environment and the air pollution in your local area. So it sounds like a great option. And Go Cool, if I remember correctly, renewable propane for people who are currently using regular propane, that it's again, I think you said, pretty sure you said that's a drop-in replacement. I know it is, but I
It
just
is.
want to reiterate that it's a drop-in replacement, just like renewable diesel is for diesel. Is that
Is that,
correct?
that is correct. It's the same C3H8 molecule that's available. So it is a drop-in replacement. In fact, PERC, when renewable propane was in its foundational stages 6, 7 years back, we had actually done a study with an F650 with the University of California, Riverside. We drove it around with conventional propane and renewable propane and looked at the performance and emissions, and they were identical within the statistical errors in real world driving and testing. And so several school bus fleets, like medium duty to heavy duty fleets today are using renewable propane. Predominantly, most of it is going into California. both for, like I said, both for on-road vehicles and forklifts. But we are also seeing some market pull in Washington and Oregon for forklifts and on-road vehicles right now.
Excellent.
New Mexico is an evolving market, and Hawaii just got, the governor just signed the low carbon fuel standard last week. So,
Yay,
so it's st-
Hawaii.
those
Yay. And
those markets are
Reagan,
still evolving.
Reagan, I'm sure you covered it in your presentation, but just to reiterate for, there are a lot of trucks and fleets and even consumer cars that use CNG or have used CNG. And again, they can just go to renewable natural gas and save more emissions and engine wear and tear, et cetera, like that. It's a drop in fuel, just like renewable propane or renewable diesel. Sorry.
Yeah, so a lot of the stations, if you go to a clean energy fueling station and fill up your heavy duty truck, you will get renewable natural gas in
Cool.
that vehicle, because we are nominating all of the stations that we own with renewable natural gas from sources that we have. Either we own those sources or we third party those sources, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I think it's great when I first learned about renewable natural gas, I was really glad because what you're doing is you're taking methane, which, is anywhere from 20 or more times a greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide. You're taking that would, naturally go into the atmosphere from wastewater or from farm waste or from landfills. And you're taking that, not letting it get into the atmosphere and using that, putting it into a fuel. So we're not using petroleum. So I think that's a great deal.
Yeah, we're a very niche fuel, and we don't like to pretend to be the everything fuel, but we are very specific, and we feel good about what we do.
Good, as you should. Thank you. So just we've been anybody else? I don't see anything.
I just want to add renewable natural gas and renewable diesel really complement one another. There's a good place for, some fleets have both. And so it's a good thing. I know we're working to offer and work with renewable natural gas companies so that we can offer that to companies that have both diesel and gas powered trucks. So
Oh.
they do complement one another.
And we'll wait another minute to see if anybody, I don't see anything in the Q&A or chat. Is that correct, Naomi?
That's correct.
Okay. And nobody's raising their hand. And all right, I see people dropping out. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Thank you. Thank you to Robin. Thank you to Reagan. Thank you to Gokul. And thank you, John. You guys, wonderful presentations. Thank you so much for being here. We know how busy you folks are. So thank you for taking the time to enlighten us and give us some great information, on, reducing the usage of fossil fuels and using renewable fuels. That's fantastic. Again, if any of the attendees want to contact me or my co-director, Margo Seidner, you have our phone numbers and emails on the screen. Thank you again to everybody for joining us today. And we will be sending out to the link to the webinar. The webinar was recorded. We will be sending the link to the webinar recording to all the attendees probably by the end of next week. Thank you, Brian, for running everything. Great job. Thank you very much. Thank you, Naomi, for monitoring the Q&A and chat. And thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a great day and a great rest of your week.